On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to the Life Science Success Podcast. My name is Don, and today my guest is Chris Connor, and we're going to be talking about life sciences marketing and the Life Sciences Marketing Podcast today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a consultant in life sciences. I help companies manage complexity and increase performance. So with that, welcome, Chris.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I tried to hit some of the high points, but I mean, let me just read a little bit of this. I mean, because I kind of when I was constructing your bio, I'm just sitting here going, huh. So if I read some of this stuff about you, right? It says you're the host, of course, of the Life Science Success Marketing Podcast, a really big deal. You are a scientist who has turned storyteller. You also turn conversations into content to be used for thought leadership and demand generation. You've led global marketing communication programs at Varian, at Agilent, and Thermo Fisher, and you've been producing your own podcast for 7 years, which is a pretty good running length overall. And then lastly, and I don't know CE News Media, but they recognize you as an influencer alongside of Gary Vaynerchuck and Seth Godin. So wow.
Yeah, well, I got lucky on that one, I guess. So somehow, I got put in a list where those guys were mentioned. That's the extent of it. I won't put myself in their category, but it was, Chemical and Engineering News was the folks that said those nice things about me.
That's very nice. I mean, I kind of get the, sort of these random things occasionally where somebody will say out of the blue, hey, congratulations, the Life Science Success Podcast is this or that. And I just kind of, I'm always a bit shocked. You mean there are actual listeners and actual people on my side, but I mean, you have a real audience that truly follows you after 7 years for sure, after doing this for so long.
Yeah, honestly, that's the best part. It kind of blows me away. It doesn't seem like it's, in some ways, it seems like it's been a long time. And in other ways, it just seems like I've never done anything for 7 years except graduate school. But it wasn't that successful. That's why I'm a podcaster now. So.
Well, I mean, it's considering the life of most podcasts, right? I mean, it's a pretty substantial, thing to have, especially in life sciences. So, I guess that what sort of transpired throughout your career that kind of moved you one in the direction of going from science to life sciences marketing, and then kind of secondly, what led you to where you are today?
Yeah, so I started out, as you mentioned, as a bench scientist. I have a degree in molecular biology and a master's degree in genetics. And just because it hit me right now, I mean, when I was in the lab in graduate school, some of my classmates said, you should be in marketing. But it took me, another, I don't know how many years to figure out that they were right. And maybe another 15 or so years before that actually happened. So, so I left graduate school. I got a job with an environmental services company, actually, for about a year roughly. And then that didn't turn out to be what I thought, what it was kind of sold to me as, but I learned a lot. And I saw a lot of California driving around to different sites. But I went back to the bench at the Livermore lab and did some biology there for a couple of years. Then one of my roommates from graduate school got hired as a professor at UC Santa Barbara, and he asked me to come down and help get his lab started. So I moved to Santa Barbara for 4 years, worked as a technician in his lab, working on salmonella pathogenesis. So identifying genes that virulence factors inside a salmonella that are only expressed during a host infection. Then I left science entirely for like 6 years. I've told a few people this. I don't know if I mentioned it to you before. I taught sailing in
No.
Berkeley for 6 years. So that was kind of a dream job. I took a year off to travel and then got this job as a sailing instructor when I moved back to the Bay Area. And I did that with another little business kind of in the last 3 years of that window that didn't really go anywhere, except it led me to getting hired as a marketing writer at Varian, the instrument company.
Mm-hmm.
So some people might know Varian for medical devices, X-ray sorts of things that I don't understand. They had split off from Varian, the instrument part, where they made mass spectrometers and NMR and all those things. So I was hooked up with those folks. And a couple of months after I got hired there, my boss left, and they eventually gave me his job as the Marcom manager for North America. We got bought by Agilent, was a program manager there. Then I went to Thermo for a year, a little over a year, as the marketing or Marcom director for mass spec before going out on my own. So that's the long, windy road to here.
Very nice. So for those of you who are online watching live, I'd love to hear where you're from. Please leave a comment in the comments box. Let us know where you're from, and love to just say hello as we go through the interview here with Chris Connor. We're going to talk a lot about marketing and marketing and life sciences today. So you talk about yourself moving kind of through this sort of evolution, I guess, from being a scientist to a storyteller. Do you feel like it really helps you sort of to translate things between the two? Because, oftentimes it's interesting to me in life sciences, especially, you ask somebody, what do you do? And they start off at the, look, I work with mesenchymal stem cells, and you're sitting there going, first of all, I had no idea that there was anything beyond one type of stem cell, and let alone now all of a sudden we're talking about things like delivery mechanisms and other stuff that way above my head anyway. So so I'd love to hear sort of your experience in terms of having the background in this. Does it really help overall for you to be able to bring it back and help people translate things?
Absolutely, it helps. So, of course, as anybody who spent a long time in science, your actual expertise is pretty narrow, right? I mean, salmonella pathogenesis, I'm not talking to a lot of people about that. In fact, one of the reasons why I left science was because it was so narrow, you couldn't, and I worked on things before. I'll back up to graduate school. What I worked on in graduate school was also salmonella, but it was let's say a topic that you couldn't have a cocktail party conversation about and have anybody care, right? I could talk about how salmonella, makes you sick and that it causes typhoid fever and why that's important. That I could have a conversation about, but before that, no one would care. But it definitely helps. And then I was going to say, that's a narrow topic, but I have broad enough scientific background and I know enough biology from a number of different areas, some of which I learned as a marketer. Like I didn't know much about mass spectrometry until I started marketing it, but I knew enough chemistry and could understand what was going on to be able to talk about those things. So what it does for me now, because I'm creating content, is that I have enough of a background to be able to understand, at least be curious in a legitimate way that I think represents my audience, and be able to understand and ask the right questions. But I don't know so much that I have the curse of knowledge, right? I just want to know. And I can understand when they tell me what's going on, I'll get it. And then I can turn that into a story for someone else if that's what we're doing.
Well, believe me, you have a lot better starting place than I have. I have to do a lot more research, I'm sure, to understand even just the basic science around it. So one of the things that I noticed, I know initially whenever you and I had met is you have this poster behind your head that talks about Swim County, USA, and then you produced the documentary around swimming. So can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I grew up swimming. My wife grew up swimming in the community where we live. I grew up in an entirely different place, but we met through swimming, and then our kids swim. And so I live in Contra Costa County, California, which isn't absolutely unique, but it's pretty rare that within our county we have 55 summer league swim teams, and some
Wow.
of them and it's partly about how the neighborhoods were developed here and so on, that it's kind of baked into the community. And some of the pools are so close you could walk from one to another, and they each would have a team of 200 kids. So
Wow.
participation is ridiculous. It's been going on for like 60 years. And so back in 2018, we had our end of year award ceremony, and I'm just kind of soaking up the vibe. And I just think it's kind of cool about how long this thing's been going and what it means to our community. And I said, this should be a movie. And I had earlier that year started a podcast about people whose lives were changed by swimming. So it was kind of primed to think that way. And I said, all right, I'm going to make a documentary. So I filmed for the summer of 2019. 2020, there was nothing, of course, right? We managed to have swim clinics for our kids. I could drop my daughter off at the pool. I wasn't allowed out of my car, right? And
Oh, wow.
there were all the restrictions. Like
Yeah.
you could drop them off. They have to go to a certain place. And then, so last summer I finished filming it. And then over the winter, I did all the editing and put it together and released it about 3 months ago. So it kind of tells the story of kind of what kids get out of it. The punchline is, little kids grow up swimming. A lot of them come back from college as coaches. And in the middle teen years, they're starting to look at the older kids and realize, hey, they're interacting with adults in a positive way, which is nice. And at the same time, they realize that the little kids are looking at them in the same way, and so it sort of has this, I think, honestly, a very positive effect on their behavior and their outlook and so on. So I think that's what's cool about it. And then it just goes on. And then those little kids will eventually grow up and coach the next generation. And so it's not about swimming. It's about everything around it.
Yeah. So for again, for anybody that's tuned in, feel free to just leave a comment really quickly. Let us know where you're from, and we'd love to say hello. So I also wanted to just kind of come back to your podcast. So the Life Sciences Marketing Podcast, I've actually been a long-term fan. I mean, right around, I think, the time that I started my podcast, I went out looking for every podcast that was out there, and I found a lot of really bad ones in our space. But then I found like some core really good ones, and yours is one of those, at least for me.
Thank you.
Do you want to tell, the listeners just a little bit about what kind of your show structure is and what is that you look to, sort of bring to the audience?
Yeah, I'll back up a little bit just about how I started it. So when I went out on my own after leaving Thermo, I was sort of researching ways to market myself, and I started a blog, as everybody did, in 2013. And that was okay, but I realized I had to come up with a topic every other week. That was my cadence, and think of something to say. And I felt like I had good ideas, but I felt like I'm just lecturing these people on, here's a good idea. You should try this or that. And then I realized I know a lot of smart marketers from my work. Why don't I just talk to them? And one, it'd be more fun. Two, it'd be easier. And three, the audience is going to learn a whole lot more. And so that's really it. So it's just an interview between me and someone that I managed to connect to in life science marketing, sometimes from big companies, small companies, agencies, whoever wants to share something with me. And we try to narrow it down to a pretty specific topic each time. But it's usually about a 30-minute interview conversation. Hopefully they're entertaining as well as informative. It sounds like they are, particularly, I mean, I've had people on who are CEOs, and I know there's some high-level people who listen, but I think it's inspiring to people and it connects people. Like, they know about it. It's a way for them to meet other people in the industry. I just did a survey asking recent guests about connections they've made or business they've gotten out of it, and it's pretty positive.
That's really good. I mean, it's extremely positive to know that, sort of the reach that you can have. I know I've had core topics that I would say have really, been picked up by the audience. Artificial intelligence has been one in my podcast, and then also with regards to, just the next generation sequencing would be another good, typical topic that I've had in the past. And, I guess are there, certain sort of focus areas that you have on your podcast that you normally, here's kind of the boundaries of where you see things being, or, pretty much anything inside of life sciences marketing?
Pretty much anything inside. I'll tell you where the boundaries sort of are. I mean, I've done just recently, as you saw just before we got on here, did one on sales, someone managing distributors. So that's not really what you would typically call marketing. But if you listen to it, the person I interviewed really is sort of marketing himself and his company to the distributors. But the boundaries are really, you're doing something in marketing. There's some aspect of marketing, whether it's technology or content or metrics. And then beyond that, I will interview people sometimes about their careers, or particularly people who can advise about careers. So recruiters or, HR managers. I don't know if I've specifically had an HR person on or not, but thinking that if you are a life science marketer, those are the audience I'm trying to reach, they would need help. Like, how do I assemble my team? What should I be looking for? What skills do I want? Right. Or they say, how do I get my next job? What skills do I need to have myself to move up to another level? So it's a lot about marketing, careers, a little bit of sales. Those are kind of the boundaries. We don't talk about science a whole lot.
Yeah, I have, on the flip side, I do have people that come on and talk about science. It's, as I said before, it's a little bit above my head. Oftentimes, I don't necessarily always follow along, but I have normally done a little bit of research around the topic as well. But yeah, it's one of those things where I kind of found a similar sort of thing. I would say that, in my podcast, it's, if you look at all the guests, it's the same. It's, I'll go to the outer boundaries and then I'll come back in, kind of, narrow again back to the, sort of the core purpose around it. All in all, I mean, what are you doing right now with regards to your consulting business? You also are a marketer in life sciences, correct? And you have other things that you do.
Yeah. So the podcast is really my marketing. It is essentially 90% of my marketing, I would say, and how people find out about me. But my job, what they pay me to do, is to create content. So sometimes it's video, and it could be a video just like we're making right here, that kind of video. I feel like, having made a documentary, could do a larger scale sort of video. But it's content, as you mentioned at the beginning, starting with a conversation. Yeah. I just find that an easy way to go. Subject matter experts, all kinds of people have something to say that will be valuable to the people that life science marketers are trying to reach, whether those are scientists or otherwise. So I do a couple of examples. I have one client where I host their podcast and I interview their subject matter experts who are scientists about topics of interest to their audience. I have another client that I've done a podcast for where the topic's a little broader. It's sort of a branding thing. And I'll go out and interview 5 or 6 people for an episode and then pull the little nuggets from each of those people who have sort of a different angle on the same topic and tell a story like you might hear on an NPR radio show.
Oh, sure. Yep.
And then written content on the back of some of those interviews. So I can take the interview transcript and turn it into a document, because not everybody likes to listen to podcasts, or they want something, they can go and scribble on, take notes.
That can't be, Chris.
Yeah, I know. Everybody should be listening.
Completely foreign to me, people not wanting to listen to podcasts.
But in case they don't have time this week, they can read the document. And so that's the bulk of it, is creating content for other people. And then I've been approached recently for some jobs that we haven't done yet to possibly just host a podcast or host an event where I interview people.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like some of the things that I've experienced as well. I mean, people see the podcast and then they think mostly that's what I can do. I mean, to be honest, I mean, most of my career has been spent in operations and things that have nothing to do with podcasting or marketing. This is somewhat foreign to me as well, that whole marketing side. But at the same time, I enjoy talking to people. So it's, just like you had said at the very beginning, I mean, in terms of, starting the podcast, it's a great way to have a conversation, and, it gets things started with at least opening the door to have a conversation with people. And I enjoy that part. And, in terms of the movie production or video, I should say video or audio production piece of it, there's parts to me that I enjoy from the technology side. So I enjoy the techie bits that kind of add back to putting out something. But it's been a lot of fun in a journey that I've enjoyed, and I'm nowhere near 7 years. So I mean, that part to me is just it's a great tribute to you, and sort of focusing in on how do you continue this journey, and then also keep making it interesting for your audience. So amazing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I've started some other podcasts that have been harder to keep going. I've been lucky here, maybe because this is my core thing and people find it easy to introduce me to the next person, or because I'm in this world enough that I continually find people. If I go outside of that, where it's not a topic I'm thinking about all the time, then it's a little harder to keep the flow of guests going. So, but having said that, a podcast, besides being super fun, is the best networking tool you can imagine. I mean, we're talking here because of it, but the number of people I have met and then been able to connect to each other.
Right. Yeah.
Is pretty cool.
So in terms of like content marketing or helping companies, do sort of other ways of thinking about, overall marketing, or even, you mentioned Marcom, earlier in your career journey. I mean, do you help companies with things like that as well? Or do you just primarily focus now on sort of the video and audio, aspects of things?
I focus pretty much solely on the audio, the video, and the written content that comes off of that. Yeah. I am not your guy for managing a campaign, for example, or doing analytics or any of those other things. I've found my sweet spot, and really, I admire the people that can put together a whole campaign, but my specialty is if you need content, then, I can tell a story and put it together for you, and as much as you want. But
yeah, and it seems like there are plenty of organizations that need that, especially today, and being able to sort of break it down and tell that story. And I mean, whether you have a drug or you have a medical device or diagnostic, I mean, to me, telling that story in a way that people then could connect with it is important. And whether it's the people portion of it, could be other scientists in our space, or other people even outside of our space. I mean, to me, that's one of the reasons why I like video, because I think it rapidly tells that story where if you can only hear it, it's harder to sort of visualize things. So I personally love video, and definitely would connect, I'm sure, with a lot of the stuff that you created as well.
There's so many things you can do with it beyond marketing, for example. So, I mean, having your CEO talk about their vision is something that you could do. That's a little marketing related, but what about recruiting as well? If you have employees telling their story, and then sharing that out with, I don't know if people are still struggling to hire right now. We might be on the cusp of a shift. We might be past the shift. I'm not totally tuned in on that. But I know that, a few months ago, people were struggling to find talent. And I've done some videos by interviewing employees for a client and putting together little vignette stories about what it's like to work, what their onboarding experience was like. And something I'd like to do that I've proposed is to create a Spotify playlist of just little clips from your employees. So when you're recruiting people, to say, hey, if you want to find out what it's like here, here's our playlist. Go check it out.
That'd be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And an easy way to grab it too, would be, that part would be extremely beneficial. You could just, grab and listen, to what people thought about the organization.
Yeah.
So, Chris, there are 3 questions that I like to ask every guest. What inspires you?
What inspires me is a lot of visual art and, of course, good storytelling. But since I made a movie, first of all, I really appreciate now when I go to a movie. I just saw Top Gun last week, and I see the thousands of people on those credits, and I realize how much work every one of those people does. And I realize, maybe they work on it for a little bit, but the number of moving pieces that have to be coordinated just sort of blows me away, besides coming up with an incredible story and all the technology it takes to put together a video. But also, my daughter recently inspired me in the last year and a half to get back into film photography. She just has a point and shoot camera that she uses to take pictures of her friends. But I thought, oh, we could do that together. And so I've managed to collect a handful of film cameras over the last year. And I get inspired by this guy in Finland who used to work for Intel. I think he's retired now. But he has a bunch of old cameras, and he's very creative in the kinds of photos he takes. And he has a YouTube channel every Saturday morning at 6:30. It's showing up. And so he inspires me. And helped me a lot to kind of figure out what kind of pictures I want to take. That's one example.
So do you develop them at home?
I do. Yeah. I'm shooting mostly black and white. I develop the film in my bathroom and scan them right here.
All right. Well, there you go. And what concerns you?
What concerns me, you and I talked about this because we did another podcast together. It's just the inability for people to compromise on things anymore. I mean, we're talking about the divisions in our country, and I just feel like this sort of winner take all mentality, as opposed to one group might be in charge and then another group, but let's work together to do the best we can either way. That seems like so long ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Finding a middle ground is a tough thing right now.
And I don't think it's a good long-term strategy as a country.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it seems like there's a true, like, almost like a scorched earth mentality that's out there. Look, if I can't get you to think the way that I think, then fine. That's it. Right. I mean, it just seems like a really scary place to be if we can't negotiate some level of middle ground to move forward. Yeah, I agree with you. And then what excites you?
A lot of little things excite me. I thought about this question a lot because I thought it was the hardest one. I mean, because I don't know that a lot of I get excited about big things. People will say I'm pretty chill in general, but I did think the kind of things that excite me are fixing old things that don't work and now I can use them again. And I'm not looking for those things. But for example, my son bought, this was fun, a 1985 VW van, a camper van. 670,000 miles on it, one owner.
Wow.
The engine was dead. So this is right before the pandemic. So fortunately we had something to do that summer. Took the whole engine apart, took it out, took out the block, had it rebuilt, put it back in, replaced almost every other system on the van, and now it runs. Wow. So that was exciting. And then just recently I bought an old camera at an antique store, and it failed on me, and I managed to figure out how to take apart the lens and fix that. So that just very satisfying, even though, but plenty of things around my house that my wife is still waiting for me to fix that don't excite me. Let's put it that way.
That's funny. Yeah. So, I mean, I could completely relate with that. It's great to bring something back that was truly broken or not able to run. I've had both my successes and massive failures in that realm. And so, I wish you all the luck there. I definitely would not be able to fix a VW camper van. I am not the engine guy.
You'd be surprised. I'm not either, but they're so mechanically simple. Like there's only two sizes of nuts on the whole engine, 13 millimeter and a 10 millimeter. And they made it so, and we have a local shop. I'm going to tell too long of a story, but they're very helpful. They said, if you have questions, just ask. You don't have to buy anything. We want to see you succeed. And he said, you cannot hurt anything. Just if it comes off, take it off. That was it. That was their answer. And then, but it's the satisfaction of learning, and then having figured something out and making it work again.
Wow. Phenomenal. Well, Chris Connor, thank you so much for being a guest on the Life Science Success Podcast. I've greatly enjoyed our conversation today, and wish you all the luck with both your documentary as well as your continued success with your podcast. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a treat being here.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it, and last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.